Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Francine, have you been to Canary Wharf recently?
I have lunches.
Power
Canary
lunches.
Wharf. I don't know about power lunches, but I do have lunches.
Allegra, you go there?
The funny thing is, I actually go there with my kids and for my kids because there'll be some sailing, canoeing thing there.
So it's a different thing.
It is a very different thing. It's no longer the cliche, if that's the right word, of my 20s, which was it's
Suits.
money, suits.
See, it's funny because for me, it hasn't changed at all. For me, it's a real still office real estate kind of environment because there are a lot of suits. Everybody walks really fast and the restaurants are like busy, but you can see it's bankers basically.
But the story about the Canary Wharf has changed, hasn't it, in the last few years, from being the real rival to here in the city to, is it in trouble? Are the banks giving up on it, coming back to the fold in the Square Mile? That's been the story that we've been reading about. And as that's happened, there's been a need for it to transform itself into more of a residential place, more of a destination in the city. And is that for real?
Welcome to the City of London.
The City of London.
The next station is Bank. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
The financial heart of the country.
The city.
The city.
Welcome to In the City.
Stand clear of the doors, please.
Welcome to In the City, a podcast from Bloomberg about the stories important to the City of London. This week, what are office estates going to do if there's no back to the office? I'm Francine Lacqua.
I'm David Merritt.
And I'm Allegra Stratton.
And joining us on the show is Shobi, Chief Executive Officer of Canary Wharf Group, who has worked in real estate for more than 30 years. Shobi, thank you so much for joining us. When you think of Canary Wharf, what's your dream template for what this neighborhood in London becomes? It's always been like suits and ties.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you for having me. I think it's the story of the evolution of Canary Wharf. I say we're on Canary Wharf 3.0. And what I mean by that is that most folks in the London business community knows Canary Wharf when it started 36 years ago. It was a financial center, got amazing financial occupiers to come, the infrastructure started. And then 9 years ago, we started with Canary Wharf 2.0, where we started building residential. And that really didn't come on to existence until 2020 and 2021. I mentioned earlier that people are like, well, we did this because of the pandemic. No, the whole vision was to create a mixed-use city, basically a city within the city. And that started, the residential came on like 3 years ago. 3.0 was, hey, let's focus on biodiversity. Canary Wharf has an abundance of water and canals. And so we've already got 16 acres of park. So let's go long on biodiversity. Our partnership with the Eden Project, with the Eden Dock opening up. 2 is amenities. We mentioned earlier, you can go swimming, you can play paddle, you can play go-karts, go-boats, all that kind of stuff. There's tons of amenities there because whether you live there, whether you work there, whether you play, there's something for everybody. And finally, it was to attract more occupiers because we are super well connected. And so we were only 55% financial. People look at the skyline and go, it's all the bankers. But we've evolved into a government hub. We've got life sciences now. We've got tech. Revolut is keeping its European world headquarters there. And so it's evolved into basically a city within a city. And that city in the city is basically the blueprint of how the urban environment and nature works for the benefit of humanity.
We're sitting in the City of London, the historic financial centre of Britain. And I remember when Canary Wharf sprang up, it was very much a rivalry, wasn't it? This was the alternative. Rents were cheaper. Banks were relocating from around where we're sitting now to set up shop over there. Do you see it as a rival still to the traditional city, or is it evolving into something quite different or complementary?
I actually meant it to the government. We're trying to grow the pie. You want to make the UK, London especially, the leading center in innovation, and whether it be in tech or life sciences. And so they coexist. And I think what we're trying to do is play to our strengths. And our strengths are the environment in terms of accessing the canals and accessing the parks and then having everything at your doorstep. We have 8 grocery stores. 8. Right? So it has really become a neighborhood on its own. And when you look at within 1 mile of Canary Wharf, there's about 150,000 people. That's as big as Cambridge or Oxford in terms of that scale.
What's your hardest job? Is it attracting, hoodies instead of suits? Does that make a difference? Like, how do people choose where they want to live?
I think it's not about the space, it's about the place. So everyone will be going to a sustainable green building. right? So you're going to want the best space. But in addition to that, you want place. And so convenience for employees, whether they want to go to the doctor or go to the dentist, having the ability to go to health clubs, having the ability to eat out at nice restaurants. It's that whole environment, having areas where we can go have a cup of coffee on the water, being able to swim at your lunchtime or play paddle. It's having that whole ecosystem so that no matter what you like or prefer, there's an option for you.
I think I've seen some plans for how you would renovate that central tower. And it's fascinating because it's so deep as a tower, isn't it?
Yeah.
That there's no natural light in the centre. So the architects have had to do quite interesting things around creating deep terraces and so on to get as much light into this. Can you just talk to our listeners? Personally, I found it amazing.
This is the old HSBC building,
Yeah.
which is basically like a block.
It's a block.
Ginormous and deep.
And again, it was built in the early 2000s. Elizabeth Line didn't exist. So that whole connectivity, it's really important, is that basically you have to change the entrance of that building because it basically dumps out in the Elizabeth Line, right? So you come out of the Elizabeth Line, you could be in that property within literally 30 seconds. So changing that whole access and the footprint and its streetscape of how it interacts with the Elizabeth Line. And then, well, it's got Canada Square Park on the other side. So again, connectivity to green spaces and all that stuff. And then as it relates to the bottom, one of the things that we're doing is adding more cultural uses. And so shortly, fingers crossed, we're going to be announcing a theater is going to be coming to Canary Wharf that will be playing 8 shows weekly, bringing thousands of people additionally for theater and so forth. We potentially could bring a theater at the bottom of the base of those big floor plates at the bottom. And then, again, if you go to Manhattan, if you've been to One Vanderbilt or Hudson Yards or Empire State Building, there's no real true experience of being on a rooftop in London with the outdoor. So the analogy is what's happening in Canada in that one property is happening across Canary Wharf in terms of making it a mixed-use environment, not only within one building, but within the entire 130 acres.
I think it's so interesting about this cultural angle as well. I didn't realize you're building a theatre there. I'm thinking about in Manhattan, where you have now the Pullman Arts Center right next to the new World Trade Center, or in Hudson Yards, which I guess is like a Canary Wharf style development in Manhattan. You've got the Shed. This idea that you set up culture institutions and that creates an ecosystem. I remember when Canary Wharf first started, I don't think anyone there would have thought of going to the theatre over in that area. It was very much associated
or going
mind.
Sailing or going canoeing.
But I love a cultural, icon next to me, but you actually move to be closer to schools at some point. Right, that's what everybody does in the UK, and New York is smaller. So if you're like one of the high earners with a family, and you're at Canary Wharf, you're a little bit stuck.
We just opened Mulberry Academy School in Wood Wharf this past September. So we've got an academy school that has just opened now. I think to your point, Canary Wharf is very unique in that we have scale. We have 130 acres, and so we don't own all the assets, right? So you've got JP Morgan, Citibank own their buildings, Oak Tree's there, Blackstone. You've got lots of different owners, but we get to curate that entire estate. And that curation allows us to do lots of different things.
Is it going to plan, or is it harder than you thought?
I think planning is much more difficult in the UK than it is in the US. In the US, you particularly have zoning and allows us to get on with, what the density and the use is. It's much, much harder here. You have to do so much pre-application and vetting with the local jurisdictions. And so, we've been involved in Tower Hamlets, we've been involved in Lambeth, we've been involved in the city. Each jurisdiction is own, but the planning requirements and the timeline it takes to get stuff developed is extremely long.
And successive governments have talked about trying to unblock the pipes on that. Do you have any optimism that the new Labour government are going to actually remove some of that perceived red tape?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think the first step is to acknowledge that there's a problem, and now the question is how to solve it and how to get some central government involvement with the local jurisdictions to make it a little bit more efficient. But it's desperately needed. And I think, we're one of the biggest builders of housing in terms of rental housing that we're trying to build. And again, in Canary Wharf, we're building different price points. So luxury, mid-market, entry-level, even affordable and intermediate housing. And to be able to do that, to taking market risk for 4 or 5 years is very difficult.
Can you talk to us about the phenomenon of working from home, WFH? It sounds like, to people.
What? Working from home? Does that still even happen?
No, it doesn't happen around here.
It's that, to people listening, what is your analysis of, the footfall of workers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me step back. In the residential population, only 30% of our residents live and work at Canary Wharf. So we've really established a neighborhood, right? So all the housing that we're doing, the people who are living there are
Going
elsewhere. So whether it be to Stratford or to Westminster, et cetera, like that, because of the Elizabeth line, the Jubilee, and the DLR, we're getting new trains again. Those three newest connectivities are all through Canary Wharf. I think, you've seen all these different companies now announce how they're trying to get people back to the office. It's been proven, ironically, both for being in the office and about being around blue and green spaces, your creativity increases, your innovation increases. It takes much longer to get stuff done if you've got people in the office and remotely. Companies are realizing that, and I'd be ironic. Someone should do the study of who's profitable and whose earnings are growing versus their culture of who's in the office and who's not.
I would love to see. I think.
Right.
Have you done it?
We have not. No. We've done the study of.
Shobi.
We've done the study. We've done the study of the whole innovation and collaboration about being around blue spaces and green spaces, right? And that's been proven. To your point about our traffic, last year we had 67 million people going through our retail centers, highest ever. Retail sales are the highest ever at Canary Wharf's history. This year, we're 7.5% higher than last year's record. We're going to be over 70 million visitors this year through our retail centers. So that just shows you the power of people not only coming back, but then the neighborhood that's emerging and now is becoming a destination in its own right in terms of all the amenities and restaurants that we've got.
But are you finding that your companies there are feeling under pressure to put on or to brag about and to say there's all these amenities here and come back, not just because you work here, but also because we're going to put on this event or there's going to be this social gathering or there's going to be this, gym that you can go into your lunch hour? How much are companies feeling that they have to offer that sort of incentive?
I think it all boils down to every company's culture is different, and they're all approaching it differently in how they're trying to, empower and engage their workforce. And so I think it's a company by company decision. I think we're very fortunate that we've got some companies that are at the leading edge of that in terms of like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Citibank that are doing that, Barclays even, in fact. So I think we're beneficiaries of that. But I think that's my case about the profitability. It's really culture by culture of what each company is kind of promoting to its workforce.
Shobi, you're building a massive new space, 820,000 square feet, without knowing who the tenants are.
Mm-hmm.
Who'd be your dream tenant? Is there a company that's particularly, fun, attractive, sexy that you think will attract more residents or workers there?
We've got a new building, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
I mean, our building is pretty cool.
It is. It's not actually one company. It's basically an ecosystem because given that scale of that building, the idea is to bring in incubators so that we've already done that at Wood Wharf. We've launched 40,000 square feet of wet lab space 18 months ago, and that's full of creating these small incubators that are on their Series A and Series B round and incubating where they'll take, a couple of desks to 2,000 square feet. So that's one section of it. The next section would be, those mid-market companies that have gotten past that and are in their growing stage. And then the last would be the big pharmaceuticals and so forth. So what we're trying to do is create a vertical campus, so to speak, that not only has the benefit of the great labs that are in short demand, but then again, the placemaking that, think about it, if you're a company that's coming into London, Canary Wharf Group can provide housing for your workforce. We can provide the hotels. We can provide event space. We as a company can curate all of that to help them come in and have their business up and running.
So, but is there a name, is it an Apple, Google that you think, if they take a large chunk of that space, then it will have that wow factor, that cool factor?
I think we'll target some of the big pharmaceuticals that will want to have a big presence here. Into my analogy of the three ecosystems, that pharmaceutical company would be that third thing of have a major pharmaceutical that would come in here. And again, we would provide the full suite of services for that.
That sort of incubator style ecosystem you described, I know that's obviously contingent on a healthy startup scene and an indicator of a healthy economy. I mean, we're getting some slightly worrying numbers now about business confidence here. The Labour government being criticised, maybe talking down the prospects of Britain. You're kind of at the front line of seeing this, right? If you're seeing tenants coming in, what's your sense of that part of the economy, the entrepreneurship, the startups? Are you optimistic? Are you waiting for the budget? Like, what are the vibes?
I think everybody's waiting for the budget, so we'll kind of see what that is. But I think, again, in this kind of like, did you know that level 39 exists at Canary Wharf? Are you guys familiar with that? So level 39 was a tech incubator that started 10 years ago.
Okay.
Right? Revolut came out of that where they started with a couple of desks, and now I think they're probably Europe's, or at least the UK's largest private company. So we've got a community of about 180 companies there. It's full. We've got 2 floors. We're actually thinking of expanding to a 3rd floor now. And what we did for the tech community initially, fintech, we expanded into cybersecurity, and now we're expanding into clean tech and life sciences, where we've got now life science companies that are in there. So that ecosystem exists. Ironically, right now the UK is seen as a stability relative to the rest of Europe. And I think the government has a great opportunity now to, they're talking about growth. And so how do they incentivize companies to invest and expand in the UK? They've got a great opportunity now to make that happen.
Yeah, and we've got the investment summit coming up
Correct.
later this month. If you're a startup, would you say, the options in somewhere like Paris, which has obviously made a big play for some of these companies as well, or Berlin or anyone else in Europe, do you think London looks still very attractive?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, this is one of the reasons I came from the U.S. to London. It is a world-class city. It's got unbelievable universities, top, 10 universities here. The rule of law, the language, the time zone, the cultural of attraction of London. It is a fantastic city. And so everyone wants to come to London. Right. And I think from the government's point of view, just got to give them that little more incentive, because businesses have choices. They can go to India, China, the US, the EU, Brazil. Lots of big economies are out there, but you've got all these advantages. You just got to give them a little incentive to say, yeah, it's great to be here.
So you also have 2 very generous owners. Brookfield and the Qatar Investment Authority invested some £400 million in their long-term commitment to Canary Wharf. Do you worry about finances? You have, a couple of bonds coming up to maturity in April. There's always a problem of timeline, that what you set out to do needs to be done to make sure that the finances work. Are you comfortable with that will work out?
Absolutely. And I think just to rewind of how this happened is we had that retail portfolio due, that maturity came up in 2020. So you got to rewind in 2020. We were in the midst of the pandemic. Everyone was running away from retail. No one wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole, right? And so we went to the markets and were able to go to the corporate bond market. Fast forward now, retail is thriving. As I mentioned, the statistics, our NOI is growing dramatically, and we've had incredible appetite from the lending community. And so we think we can pretty successfully take the bonds out, refinance them with our retail assets.
Interest rates are much higher.
They are.
So that's going to be, is it complicated?
It's not complicated. I think I think we've come off the lows in terms of where real estate values have been. Interest rates have started now to decrease, and I think we're off the troughs and going up. I think it'll just be a question of timing of when we can get it, but we'll meet the market.
The most important question is, where's Dave taking us for lunch in Canary Wharf? What's the hot new place
He's
in Canary
Wharf?
Got
80 choices.
80.
No, the best. Don't give him too many choices. Just one.
People ask me that, and it's like my favorite child. I can't
we all have
differentiate. we can't differentiate, and I would upset one of them if I said any one of them.
Oh, come on, Shobi. One. Give us a 2 top. Your
Well,
ideal
I'll
day.
give you the
in
2 that
Canary
have
Wharf.
just recently opened. So we've constantly been opening up restaurant after restaurant. So Row just opened up in Wood Wharf, and then Marceline Havarda, which opened on one of our floating pavilions. Those 2 just opened up in the last 2 months, and they're outstanding.
You taking notes?
Got it. Let's go.
Thanks for listening to this week's In the City from Bloomberg. This episode was hosted by me, Francine Lacqua, with David Merritt and Allegra Stratton. It was produced by Summer Sadi. Production support from Isabella Ward and Lauren Taverner, and sound design by Moses Andam. Brendan Francis Newman is our executive producer. Sage Bauman is head of podcasts. Special thanks to Shobi Khan. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts.